I'll start off with a little introduction of the topic, and then we will take some time just going around so everyone can talk about themselves. I thought the keywords would be who you are, what your background is, then what your work and business are about, and where you are, the geographical side of it, and why you're doing this. So if you could cover these 4 things, each of you. And then I'm very thankful to Peter and Vitze and Birgit, who sent their points yesterday, and it gave a lot of food for thought and ideas how to structure this whole thing. So we'll talk about the essence of this whole topic and the drivers behind it, and then the long-term and the short-term and then the long-term perspective from each of your point of view, where we would like to be headed as opposed to where we actually are headed. Let's think about, I don't know, 5 to 10 years and then a 50-year perspective, things like this. Then geography, because looking at this from from Northern Europe is probably very, very different than looking at it from the equator and desert states. I don't think we can skip the COVID situation and its impact on things. It's just so much of a buzzword right now, so I'll probably dedicate a couple of minutes to that as well. Yeah. Anything else you want to throw on the table now or have in your back pocket for a surprise?
Not at the moment. Let's just see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very interesting group here. Very diverse geography-wise and outlook-wise. So it should be a very, very interesting discussion. I'm actually very excited about myself. Still have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and even the technology works. That's amazing. This is usually with these platforms that you find out, you discover new ways how it can go wrong. But Peter,
you don't kind of say it too early. When it's done, then let's talk about it. It went smooth.
That's true.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. This platform doesn't work on my computer, so that's why I use my phone. So I would not say that it's worked perfectly.
Okay.
But it should be fine.
Is Birgit here?
Not yet.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was like maybe 1 hour or 2 hours ago, like going in and looking actually it's amazing how you can make this kind of conferences in so many actions going in parallel. And I have been attending TechChill here in Riga when it has taken place, and usually like it's big house with a big room and smaller stages and networking place and coffee and all these buzzes around it. And I was a bit like looking how it will make possible to make it in this digital format, and actually amazing how it can replicate. Of course, you cannot get the same kind of networking maybe feeling, but I think they have thought about that as well. And so it's adapting to different changes. And also bringing a possibility to bring so many people together.
Yeah.
And actually save a planet from traveling. Yeah, wow.
Also, yeah.
All right.
No, I don't see Birgit yet, indeed.
It's showtime. Okay, I think we are. I think we're live now. Still missing Birgit though, but I hope she joined us any moment now. Let's see if I can. All right, we have 14 viewers so far.
Okay.
Let's start slowly, and I hope that we will be joined by more people. Welcome to the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Roundtable. These are big words. If you think about the history of society over the past several centuries, then ever since the Industrial Revolution, we as humans have been fighting nature as much as we could, and increasingly so, because we realized that so much money could be made off of it. And at some point, the nature started fighting back. So here we are, and the issues that we are faced with right now were actually formally formulated probably only in the 80s of the last century. Before that, we were more or less blind to it, so excited about turning rivers in the opposite direction and then mining everything we could out of the planet. But what do we see now? We see population growth, uncontrolled, more than the planet can possibly sustain. We see poverty, growing poverty. We see urbanization. We see dire environmental degradation. And then climate change, which has now become way too real, is just an accelerator behind all these things. So it's just a series of non-stop interlocking crises popping up here and there all the time. This is the world that we're living in now, and whether it goes into the direction of Mad Max, or whether it goes into the direction of, the classical Greek ideal of Atlantis, that's we are not even sure whether it's up to us anymore. But here we are trying to do something about it, at least. And at the panel today, at the roundtable, we have 5 speakers who will introduce themselves in turn in a moment. I'm the moderator. My name is Elvira Tulvik. I'm based in Tallinn, in Estonia, pretty far north, a very small country, with a great startup scene. I will boast that Estonia has more unicorns per capita than any other country in the world. I don't know how we did it. I myself am a lawyer. I'm a partner with Magnusson, which is a Nordic Baltic law firm, and I'm head of technology law practice. And technology law is a very sort of amorphous type of thing. Everything that has a word technology or technical or regulatory in it is basically what we do, and we make it up as we go along, more or less, and considering the speed at which the world is moving nowadays. I also have a background in nuclear physics and international relations, which makes my world a little bit more colorful. I have the luxury, being a lawyer, I have the luxury of, first of all, being positioned in between startups and the capital, and also being positioned in between business and the state with all its regulatory power, and observing what's going on sort of a bit from the outside. Now I turn over to the panelists. If you could please introduce yourselves. We can start from Inese, for example.
Hello, my name is Inese Andersone, and I'm here from Riga, Latvia, neighbors to Estonia, and I'm leading the city development committee. So I'm probably here representing politician side, policy side in the city level, and cities are, as we know, concentrating a lot of population and have been among the highest polluters in the world. And cities need to take this responsibility towards climate change seriously and going from the headlines to actions. And I'm actually in this position now only 8 months, and we are the new political leadership here in Riga. And one of our goals are actually to bring Riga climate neutral by 2030. It's very ambitious. Hopefully we will get there by 2040, but at least we have ambitious goals. And actually we are focusing many of our actions towards different ways how we tackle climate change, but also how we cooperate with startups. So I would like to further in the discussion both see some best practice from around the world, but maybe also bring some news from our side, what we have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liene, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I mute my microphone because of noisy house. Hi everyone, I'm Liene Briede and here representing Riga Technical University. This is one of the leading universities in Baltic states. And we have been connected with the European Innovation Technology Institute, specifically with Climate Kick and also with raw materials and food. I was one of the person who leads all these free topics in Latvia or in Baltics, and so very connected with the Climate Kick accelerator and the startups, and so that's why this topic is really important for us, and we have seen how it have been grown in a couple of years. Also, I have been a part of our Green Innovation Center, who was the first specific incubator in Latvia, specifically work with the clean tech and green tech startups, and it was a couple of years ago. So this was a big deal for Latvia to have that kind of specific topic. And yeah, I'm really passionate about the startups and startup innovation ecosystem, and I have been working, I believe, in the last 10 years with all these topics. So I'm really grateful to be here in a roundtable with these people and discuss this extremely important topic regarding the startups and climate change and how we can help startups see this as an opportunity, not just something political.
Thanks. That's fascinating. Having somebody from the academia is always wonderful because it just adds just another angle to the whole discussion. All right. Thank you. Vitze, what about you?
Yeah. My name is Vitze Hermanns. I live nowadays in Latvia since more than a year, just halfway between Riga and the Estonian border, basically, on the coast. So that's where I'm situated at the moment. Most of my career in European projects, especially cross-border projects, been involved a lot with that in the past, and also there had a lot to do with both startups and innovation, but also the side of especially more recently of climate change, sustainability issues being more and more important issues in the. So that's one of the things I would like to also bring in my experience from the past working in this field angle. And also right now I'm working for an organization called ARC 2030. We are working on especially on nature-based solutions to tackle climate change, but also biodiversity crisis and other things, because one of the things we found out and are working on right now is also that it's not just about tech when you talk about these things. You also have to look at nature-based solutions for a very large deal, especially if you talk about climate issues. So there is one of the points I would like to bring to the table when in the discussion.
Well, all right. Thank you very much. Peter.
Sure. So my name's Peter Mockel. I'm an industry specialist with IFC. IFC is the private sector part of the World Bank. So we bank with companies in emerging markets and also with companies in Europe or America that have solutions for emerging markets. I'm an engineer, and I won't apologize for that. So in the sense that my opinion is a little bit more supply driven than maybe my organization as a whole. So please take that as my personal opinion. We work in a team at IFC that invests in early stage companies in climate tech, and and I guess we have been the first development bank to do that for more than a decade, and have invested in companies for example, battery technology or more efficient logistics in globally. I think that's a little bit our differentiation, that we are one of the few investors that can pattern match this kind of thing on a global level. So, for example, we went through a wave of investments in companies, let's call them Uber for trucks, quote unquote, that match trucks and loads, and we've done that in China and India and Africa and in Latin America, and can recognize these models and support them globally. I think I'm doing this because I think that a lot of the solution to the to climate is supply driven, is technology driven, and that one of the most efficient allocations of investment is in terms of dollar per GHG reduced is in better technology, and that's our mission, to get that technology more quickly deployed in emerging markets.
Thanks. That's very interesting. In fact, and I can talk about it because it's public, but we just our law firm just finished a project with you guys several months ago.
Okay.
So,
all right.
yeah.
Well, I think I have to tune down the propaganda a bit, because you know what we're like.
No, it's all right. I'm just the moderator, so you're free to express whatever is on your heart.
Good.
From the accent, I understand that you are originally German, right?
Yes, that's a bit hard to hide. So I used to run the R&D labs for the German telecoms company Deutsche Telekom, and so was part of the first wave of kicks in, I think 2009 or 2010. So I think we're all from the same world.
And Vitze, you are Dutch, right?
I'm Dutch. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a wonderful group, great geography, very different backgrounds, and it's very promising. So let's kick it off. The first word, where we speak about. Oh, is that Birgit that finally joined us?
Yes. Hi. I'm so sorry. I was actually sitting in, but I didn't realize why I wasn't visible. So I only figured out that I needed to go backstage. So I was just obviously, I think, was sitting in from the participant side.
Okay, now, well, it's great that we have you here finally. So just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Birgit, founder and CEO of the Ocean Opportunity Lab. We are based out of Norway, but we are a global community of entrepreneurs and innovators of the ocean and renewable energy industries. So we're spanning across 22 countries with our partners. And we are working then on enabling innovators and startups to connect with the people they need or resources they need to further develop their solutions.
Okay, great. And your background, maybe education and things like this?
Yes,
Interest?
so I'm originally a school dropout, so I don't have a higher education, but I've spent the past 15 years in international maritime industry, and I've been leading up several global roles. Worked through 80 plus countries. In my previous job before setting up Tool, I was also in charge of developing and executing on the business program for Oslo as the European Green Capital. The city government of Oslo, connecting startups and corporates. So yes.
Oh, that sounds great. An even better group now. But let's dive into this thing head on. And the first thing I want to talk about is who is doing this and what is stopping this. So what do you think are the drivers and what do you think are the obstacles right now on this trajectory where we're trying to keep this planet fit for housing us? Peter, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we do financing, so that's when you have a hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I think that financing is one of the major obstacles here to scale this up. So what we see a lot is that we have startups that come up with new technology, and then especially in deep climate tech, they're much more capital intensive than let's say consumer tech B2C startups, and they need a longer investment horizon. A lot of the investors have 7-year horizons for funds. We just we had a number of technology investments that took a decade to play out. So if we had divested after 7 years, it would have been a loss. And after 10 years, they actually look pretty good. So you need a longer horizon to invest. Often for, let's say, for technologies that uses more capital intensive plants, let's say, use an example, big battery systems. They you may venture funding may get you to the first pilot project, and then maybe you get some government support for bigger a project, but then the second and third plant are really hard to finance, because that if you want the lender into a project that actually debt funds this, and you need debt to scale up, you can't do it all with equity, then they want reference projects. They want 3 plants that have been running for 3 years, and that is very hard to bridge. So we see a number of technologies that struggle to get to that second and third plant. That's from the financing perspective one of the gaps.
So basically, this is a world where there are a lot of willing startups that have the idea and want to go on with it, but getting financing just takes so impossibly long because investors want to see where the money is.
Yeah, and that used to, so the venture investors are used to more capital light models. But some of the technologies we're talking about here, in hydrogen, in long duration storage, in carbon capture, they are very capital heavy. So we need a better funding model for capital heavy climate technologies.
All right, Vitze, what do you think?
Yeah, well, maybe to follow up a bit on what Peter said, I also have the impression, maybe I'm maybe as an outsider a bit also, that I think the investor market is maybe also a bit on the conservative side there, because they think, well, they're used to investments, let's say, in the old style industry, which gives good benefits, etc. And of course, the environmental tech and also anything related to that, also more nature-based solutions, they require a lot of funds, like Peter said, but also they have, at least because they're less known, they have a higher risk profile, and that's also, I think, one of the reasons. And profile and unknown, let's say, long-term perspective if you look at return on investment, because there's not so much experience yet in some of these sectors. So that's maybe also be one of the hindrances there. And another one is probably also, like I said, related to that, that people are used to investing in, let's say, in fossil fuel industries and everything related to that. And they see that as a stable and safe market. So they don't dare that much to look beyond that, maybe the traditional ones on the investment side. But luckily, there's a lot changing. At least what I see, what I understand, also because the policy is changing in that field, of course.
So we're now bringing also policy into this, but you gentlemen talked about this. Is your outlook geographically limited? Is this how you see it going on, for example, in Western Europe or in Europe? Or do you think this is actually how more or less the global situation looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I work mostly in emerging markets, so I work mostly outside Europe and the US, and it's clearly there's even higher risk. From an investor perspective, you have the technology risk, and then you have the emerging market risk. So you pile risk on top of risk, so it's even harder. So we obviously new technologies, they do get deployed in Europe and in the US first. So we had wind and solar leading in Europe. You had now energy storage actually more leading in the US than in Europe. But still, this is where today, so that's one of my fields, energy storage. 80-90% of the activity is still in OECD countries. So it gets harder as you get into emerging markets, because that's yet another risk you're taking. And I think this is one of the keys. We need to get these technologies much faster into emerging markets to avoid GHG there too.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Inese, you're looking at it from a little bit different angle, right? What is your outlook?
Yeah, you asked Elvira about the kind of challenges and needs, and I think like leadership and aware leadership regarding the climate change is actually on top, and from that starts it going bottom kind of down with actions. So I think that's what we have seen now, the change. So last years, it has really we see this awareness in political leadership regarding climate, at least in Latvia and Baltic region, I could say. And what we are also our next challenge is like make the utility companies and all other kind of big actors which are aware of the kind of climate topics within their stuff, how they would start to transforming from the more conservative and kind of standard way of working to cooperation with the technology providers, innovators, startups. And again, it's about leadership, so that the leaders on top understand what is the value of it. And maybe they also need to risk with their time, because the value, maybe outcome will be that there is a good try, but it didn't work with that startup. It doesn't mean that we don't try with another one or with another innovator. So that process, actually, we have started to move in Riga and starting to kind of even push a bit companies, the bigger, larger players, towards being more open to cooperation. And for example, now yesterday there was a demo day within one accelerator, grid accelerator here in TechChill, where our utility company, where for 3 months' time they were cooperating with a startup and for monitoring of heating pumps and installing a new system in, and both parts are winners, because one sees a new technology can save their time for kind of monitoring the pumping system, and startup gets a first client who say, well, it's, or not, maybe not first, but one in this region, or with a who says, yes, well, this technology worked. We are now looking forward to how we can employ it further. So kind of this challenge is about new working practice, and because it's not standard procurement, you cannot really. And in the same time, there is a possibility for the innovation procurement. And again, it is a good headline, innovation procurement. Now we need to think down how we can make it into reality, and so that's kind of challenges of. But I think my kind of answer would be the leadership, so that there is that, then you can start to think the ways how you start to solve the topics.
Mm-hmm. Have any of you actually seen in practice how? For example, conditions for investment on the investor side cite that actually the sustainability issue should definitely be addressed, and they're not putting money into anything that does not address that component. And the same conditions coming from insurance companies as a way to actually promote sustainability and climate change issues within the startup scene. Have you seen this done in practice, and whether this is a first step for the capital from becoming an obstacle to actually helping the sustainability issues along?
If
or
I
is
may,
it just declarative?
I can comment on this, as we have been working with startups for couple of years, and I would say 100% yes, it can have been an obstacle for the startups to develop or scale, and I believe this is also quite interesting. Thank you, Peter, that you raised this, and also let's say that about investment and how the investor look on the climate related technology. And sometimes it takes really long time. Most of the startups are deep tech or science-based startups, and it takes time to do the validation, to demonstration, and it's quite expensive. And sure, for an investor, it's a high risk. And the question is, who's paying for that? and mostly these demonstrations and validation, it's extremely expensive. And if we think about, yes, we have a lot of different kind of tools, mechanisms to really support the startups or the ideas. Let's take a project or Europe Horizon or others, but still, you can imagine how long time you should to write a project. Then there is a big competition to get this fund. Then it's time to implement, and there is administration behind that. And if you put together with the startup, it doesn't work really well. So what we have seen, this is, I believe, also an interesting topic, that climate change, it's not something linear, and that we have like linear problem. It's systematic problem, and startups can't solve them alone, right? So this is not something that startups will bring on the table all the solutions that we need, and then in one day everything will be okay. It doesn't work like that. And what we have seen that for the startups, there's great ideas. For the academia, there's a great, I would say, all of the solutions we need, that they're already there on the shelves, maybe in the universities, maybe in the startup minds, but it's not on the market. And there's question why. And it's my just opinion, but I believe market is not ready to pay for these solutions, and that's why the investments, if we think about let's say the climate change market value, it's estimated to $2.1 trillion. It's huge. I would say maybe it's the most of the leading markets at the moment. So the investments have been grow 100% in a couple of years for the startups. But if we look at the climate KPIs, so climate change KPIs, we are still there. There's no improvement, and the question is why. and if the startups is the right way how we can solve, yes, they are faster, they are flexible, they can make this contribution with industry that's really important and really impact the climate change. And I believe in this sense we need to understand who could pay for this validation and demonstration, and who can really impact the climate change. And this will also go with the investment or investors' mindset, how they look on the startups or the industry related to the climate change issues. This is like a comment from my side.
You have raised actually a huge issue here. Birgit has been looking very emotional all through your comments. Birgit, what do you have to say?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that we have a lot of experience in from the Norwegian market. The focus on power coupling, I think, is essential here, because one thing is, of course, that the innovators and startups, they need hard funding to get to the next stage. But another dimension, which I think is just as critical, and which is also kind of the gap that we really need to fill in new ways, is to connect the problem owners of the existing current industries with the problem solvers that are the startups. So I would say that a huge opportunity space here is for both the public sector and big industrial owners, family businesses, etc., to come in and actively increase their ratio of innovation as collaboration partnership projects with startups. Because then they can get in the new thinking, they can work much closer and in a much more dynamic relation with startups, and you get the best from both worlds. But then in order to do that, I think it's really crucial, and that's a huge opportunity for the public sector, the way that the public sector sets up their businesses, so that if they put out new projects on the market, they should make sure to use the framework for green innovative procurement, but not only look at which solution you want to achieve or which problem you want to solve, but also actually include the parameters that those actors that get those projects should be a mix of established company and startups. Because then you create kind of the market mechanism that is needed for the startups. And once the startup has an actual project that they're in on, or a pilot customers that want to co-develop the solutions with them, of course, then it's a whole different business case for the investors to come in.
Can I
yes.
to Briede
Yes, of
a
course.
question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any experience or the situation that you have faced that the big industry players, we have also that kind of cases, really look in the startups and they choose some of them and really to start work with them. But then it's one deal. This kind of big industry players, they are not interested that startup will scale to another customer. So they want this specific solution and they want a full ownership of it. Then, and for startups, it's also the big decision if we will work with this big company, because this means this is my only customer. This is my one customer. Have you been such kind of experience, and maybe, I don't know, some kind of scenarios what startups should do in this kind of situation? Because these big players, they said that they own rules for the startup, and it's big issue for them.
I mean, yeah, I've seen several examples of both, because of course the startup gets into a very vulnerable space, and it's of course very attractive to say that, okay, the first customer who comes to the table, they demand exclusivity, and you are kind of inside the box, and they have basically then all the power, because they can also kind of slander you if things don't end up, working in the right way for any odd reason. They can kind of give the thumbs down, which will then affect your whole future. But I would say that is also a matter of maturity within the industries, because these innovation issues, they will not be solved and needed by one big player. So in that extent, I would say that the best scenario then is to also work with the corporates, to have them understand that, if the startups can work with several players in the market, and then maybe rather you can set up a kind of a consortium where they can have pilot customers that are not directly competing against each other, but that can utilize the same technology. That is a good scenario. But I also think that one of the entrepreneurs we work with that have a drone AI technology for fish farms, they have one company on board as investor and customer, but they are still, they have managed to get this setup where there is no exclusivity in it, because the corporate then understands that, if they're going to change their industry for the better, you don't only need that one corporate coming up with a new solution, you need many others to adapt and get on the train, sort of. So I think this is also a perspective of educating the corporates, because
if you allow me to, because you two ladies just put your toes into the area where I was doubting where I want to go, but now I understand that I actually do. And I would take your arguments and scale them up, because actually, if we think about climate change and sustainability, this is actually a question of no less than keeping this planet habitable in the foreseeable future. Now, if we think about how humanity handled the prospect of waging global wars in the 20th century, the only way to stop that, and the only way that's been, in fact, still is being holding off the nuclear crisis, is a world government type United Nations. And when humanity stepped into space, with all sorts of perspectives coming from on the one side of the spectrum, unlimited possibilities for research and science, but then on the other side of the spectrum, again, using space to eliminate ourselves, then the only thing keeping that from becoming total chaos are again global, really universal agreements like the Moon Pact. Are we actually more or less approaching the point where we would need some type of a universal organization or world government type thing to promote climate change ideas and sustainability ideas, and make the businesses and the governments and the regulators understand that this is not something to just use for money?
Have global arrangements in place, just that they don't work efficiently enough. And
they don't work, exactly.
When you look at the UN system and the UN Global Compact. But yes.
I mean, yeah, let me push back against that. I'm sorry. We are all about the private sector. So I think that you need the private sector to make this work. I think if you, if we need international cooperation and multilateral institutions, but I think to pin your hopes on a global government, I'll be very careful. I mean, a lot of the companies that we work with, they of course they need government support, and a lot of the technology isn't just purely from the private sector. You have here universities and in the Horizon program is very valuable in the US, ARPA-E and DOE fund companies, but then the private sector scales it up and makes it grow. I think if you, I'd be very careful to hope for world government to pick the winners and to tell us what to do. I really think you need the private you need the private sector economy to scale this up, which will always be. And I think this is an opportunity to make money, and this is how people will get motivated. I don't think we'll solve this by telling people to fly less, drive less, and eat less. I think this will bring us better products and better solutions, and people will want this. They will want an electric vehicle rather than an old legacy vehicle because it's better. And I think that's what will help us solve this. Not a world government.
Yeah.
No, I will correct myself. I said world government-like structure. Space is private. All space industries are mainly private industries. But do we need some global sort of body or system that would tell the states that you cannot tax up to a certain point, you have to support R&D, and you have to ensure that wherever you put your capital, it has the sustainability and climate change element to it? Birgit.
You see that now the financial sector is teaming up. So you see a lot of the big funds go together and put in new requirements. That again drives the green shift with everybody who wants them to invest. I also think that in general, big industrial corporations, they can do a lot, and they are starting doing more when it comes to then requirements to their suppliers. So that's again another mechanism that can really drive that change, because if your customer sets requirements in order for you to get a contract, then you will act. So I think probably those two sectors, the kind of the investors and financial community and big customer groups, they can really drive this shift. But I would also point one finger to a mechanism that can work even though national governments can go slow. Governmental agreements can be slow, and that is kind of the regional or city-to-city collaboration, such as we see with the C40 and other alliances, where pioneering city regions, they can go together and drive this, and they are also representing huge financial capacities. So when they say go, they also have the same power as the private sector, I think. But that's can go much faster than a national country or an international area.
If I
in developing countries out of this if we take this approach. What do you think, Peter?
I mean, the cities example is great. I really like the example for that big corporations can set standards by requiring their suppliers to follow. For example, let me use an example. The telecoms industry, where I'm from, so I can criticize them. They go on about how environmentally friendly they are, how we won't fly, but to teleconferencing. But there's probably 1 million diesel generators humming along right now as we speak in emerging markets where the grid is bad, powering these base stations. And diesel is a terrible way of making energy. And now we can do that with solar and batteries. There are solutions out there. And that I think that's an industry, for example, that can really do a lot of good by requiring its energy to be clean, and it won't even cost more. So I'm sure there are tons of other examples in other industries where that's the case. And going back to startups, there are startups that are offering that solution. There are companies that can take telecom base stations and turn them into renewable energy-driven base stations. And that's that. And if big corporations know they won't get away with doing dirty diesel energy, then they will create the demand for the startups to supply that solution.
Well, the question is exactly why would they not get away with doing things the way they've been done for decades?
Yeah, I mean, they probably need their Nike moment. I think there's I mean, some of these things are relatively complicated, so it's hard to communicate what the problem is. But I think if people realize how the contradiction is, you see advertisements for, you see ads on TV of how good telecoms is for to decarbonize the industry, and then you look under the hood and you see what's going on. So, and I think that's going to be the case in other industries too. So I think communication is important, and ultimately the customer, going back to my belief in that the free market can solve this, the customer will demand this, and then this will feed through to corporations demanding this.
Yeah.
Vitze, you are
nodding. Exactly. Well, I also want to go back a bit to your original point, Elvira, and also what Birgit mentioned. I think it's also crucial in this that we shouldn't waste too much time. We don't really have time for competition in the market, also between a large corporation trying to figure out new technologies and buying them from as a solar client from a startup. We need cooperation, because we only through cooperation, like really working on all levels together, we can really tackle this problem. Also because it's too complex really to simply say, we have a few startups who develop a few things, we have a few companies who need to invest, and then we're there. No, I don't think so, because if you have a good solution for one aspect of climate change, it may be bad for biodiversity, or vice versa. You really have to full scale dive into this full complexity of all these things that link together. Like the idea of Silicon Valley, for example, in the past, where government and companies and everyone else on the line, even customers and even people who live there in the region, work together to build a platform. And now you see worldwide a lot of these valleys coming up in all sectors. We cannot have one company or one country saying we have climate valley. We need climate valleys in every country across the world who work together. Basically, that should be the new valley principle, where all these organizations stimulate each other, where you can learn from each other, because otherwise you will have one solution here which works well and another solution there which may be a little bit better, but we still don't get anywhere worldwide with solving the problem, because they don't communicate, they don't cooperate with each other. We need this cooperation also on a high level, and their policy can stimulate, can take care by saying, like the EU now did, saying we have this recovery fund, and 30% of all the investments need to go for climate, period. So that's actually the standard. If you have this stimulation, then you also have the let's say the platform for people to work together to jointly come up with solutions. And I think that's also a very crucial element.
I agree. As a lawyer, this may be professional cretinism, but I always ask when we say, you know, things should be this way, or it definitely required that things are this way. I always ask, well, if the actors don't do it, what's the sanction? And right now, this is a bit slack, because there is really no sanction. We can be good-hearted people and, you know, very committed to the future of our species, but if we're not, then well, so what? And related to this is the question, have we already run out of time? Because financing is slow, the regulatory side is slow. There's a lot of activity going on, but on grassroots level, with the startups, you know, and a little bit of financing trickling from above. But the planet is heating up. Do we still have time?
Well, like I said, that's why we need to speed up through cooperation. And the stimulus from governments, from other side, also from the financial sector, which you see more and more, should be that, let's say, also the financing people say, well, we only support solutions which cover, let's say, not only a small bit, but a huge bit. And we, as a finance sector, should also stimulate these cooperations between university and startups, between businesses, small and larger business, between governments and others. I mean, there is a role for government, but also for the financial sector to jump in and to say, to set new rules, basically, how to speed up things.
Yeah, if I may add on, and from the city side, again, looking at, I think European Commission and the funds are actually a good motivator for the governments, public institutions to start move to that direction. And we just went through a recovery and resilience fund, which are coming after COVID-19 now to different states. And I have been seeing how it's kind of these traditional ideas, projects compete with oh, these are more climate positive, or these are bigger climate impact than that. But if we will not do that, we cannot do that impact. So this all discussion started because there is a competition for money, and if you have more like a CO2 better impact, you are getting higher points. So all this money drives also the public institution. And I would say from the kind of not only carrot side, but from the stick side, there is also like air pollution. Well, if you are in Europe, we can get fines for bad air pollution, or waste management. If we don't handle that topic enough good, there is, again, not only carrots from European Commission, but we need to pay in money fines. So I think this traditional instruments of carrots and pie sticks works here as well very good. And again, like just we need to move maybe faster with what are the other way.
Great point.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the interventions that's, I mean, it's obvious is that a lot of these business cases we look at in startups, they are where you save energy. They're sort of marginally interesting. If you add a reasonable carbon price, they become insanely profitable. So, you know, if with a reasonable carbon price, suddenly all these efficiency models where, you know, today it's nobody's core business, you save a bit of energy and it's hard to sell. But if you add that in, that would just make these companies so much more interesting for investors. I think that's clearly something we need. We need a globally universal carbon price of some kind too, and then suddenly you get so much more capital going into efficiency, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we don't have this much time left, but there's still one thing that I want to pick your brain with. We know where we are now. and we know where we're more or less likely to be in 5 years. Now, to ensure that looking ahead 50 years, say, or 75, the lifetime of our children and grandchildren, could each of you please give me 2 or 3 points, very realistic, very down to earth, very practical, that you see that can and should be done now to make sure that the planet is habitable at the beginning of the next century? Birgit, what do you think?
Basically, then I can just sum up what is our mission in the Ocean Opportunity Lab. That is about building regenerative business models, so that now when we build new solutions for the future towards zero emission and zero waste society, we need to build our businesses and solutions in a way where we regenerate more resources and life back into the ecosystem. So we need to start draining out of the ecosystem. We need to make sure that when we build something, we have to give more back than we take out. So I think that is kind of our core focus here. We need to build better, and we need to more look at now how nature sets up its ecosystems, and then we need to adapt that back into our business creation. So that's my key focus. That should be achievable. It's just a matter of changing our mindsets, and that will enable us to use less resources, gaining profitability, building more robust companies and solutions for the future.
And what would you need the investors and the state and the local governments and everybody else to do to enable you to get there?
That would mean that, well, carbon taxation, obviously, that is essential, and that comes from national and international governments. Then I would say from the investment community, there is a huge need for them also to prioritize, to put in both green and socially sustainable criteria in their investment strategies. And then I would also say that we need new funding mechanisms between the kind of soft funding and the VC and normal financing. We need those kind of long-term investment mechanisms that could potentially come from big family corporations or other big industrial environments where they are used to, the fact that it takes time to develop new technologies and new solutions, and especially when we're looking at really recreating the supply chains and infrastructures of energy and transportation and industry. So I think that here there is a current gap that we need to create new financing tools for, really. And that's a huge challenge for the financial sector, and a quite interesting one. And I think combining kind of long-term investment from the big funds with the long-term investment focus from big family corporations, that could be a good way of starting. Because there are a lot of gaps that the VC and existing domains can't fill in a good way today, and that is putting us all at great risk and hindering progress.
Thanks, that was great. Vitze, what about you?
Yeah, maybe short also to jump in on the last point. That's exactly what we are trying to do right now with ARC 2030. It also comes from originally from a group of family investors, basically joining forces and coming up with new ideas to set up a system, a new financing system, basically introducing both public and private funding. And one of the things we are trying to do is set up also a carbon market model, which allows any kind of business and any kind of individual also to say, well, I want to set off my carbon credits in a good way. Can you offer me projects, let's say in my own country or in my own area, where I can invest in and where I can put the carbon credits? That's exactly what we are doing. We are building programs across the world, basically, trying to match the financing on one side and the project on the other side. Also preventing actually that startups keep running after the money, and also allowing them a platform to look at. So we're talking to European investment banks and other banks across the world. So definitely, at some point, others within ARC will also talk to Peter and his colleagues alongside. We'll also talk to governments to see how we can handle this, because also we believe that we need a long-term strategy to which should begin now, basically, because we also want to. It's not for without reason that we call ourselves ARC 2030. We really see 2030 as a time where we should already have been achieving a lot of things. Otherwise, we won't make it on the longer term. So we need to start acting now, and we're happy to help anyone, also investors, also startups who want to use these funds. We will try to be also active in any way as a broker in between, let's say, between the financing market and the business and the nature investments in nature needed.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hear from Liene.
I just can add to the colleagues, and I would say one of actions that should be taken is education on all the levels, because we think that this education part from society perspective and the society behavior impact on the climate change is crucial, and it's to take responsibility about your actions. It's important, and without education, it's impossible. And also education in a startup level that you mentioned, Brigitte, that all the solution that it's there should have this climate neutral perspective, or it's like minimum program, but better that they do something good for the climate change. And also in industry, in investor level, it's also something that should be done. Industry, all the possibilities that they can take, and that this climate change issue is a possibility for industry, not something problematic that they should solve. And for investors to understand again the possibilities to invest in the long-term investment in the climate change market. So I believe that education is something that I would stand for, that it should be taken as an action and prioritize regarding the climate change.
Thanks so much for this. Education is actually often overlooked as an aspect, a very important aspect of it. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, I think in the we need to set clear goals to decarbonize specific sectors, and then government should set these goals, then get out of the way and not pick technology winners. So, for example, we know in electricity, we know how to do it now. In transport, there are the obvious sectors, and I'm sure there are other sectors in industry. Industrial heat is one where you can now set a plan for decarbonization and then let the private sector develop the technologies to do it. And I think that's, but as you stress the urgency, this takes a whole lot of time. And the later you start it, the more old legacy technology gets baked into the capital stock. So that in especially in these capital intensive sectors, it's really important to start early. And it's really laudable that a number of jurisdictions have now started to set 2050, 2035 targets for these sectors. I think that's what we need to then create the demand for technology. And then to finish, I think we haven't even mentioned COVID once in this conversation, which is, I mean, still, I don't want to belittle it. It's still a grand challenge, but it shows it's a good sign that we're moving beyond that and now moving to tackle the climate challenge.
I totally agree. Well, Inese, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I will try to be short. For city and for Riga, one of the main challenges is mobility, and as this great polluter for Riga at least, and so for us is really to make an infrastructure which is like climate-friendly mobility, and it's public transport, bicycling infrastructure, walking infrastructure, which is really kind of, and that infrastructure maybe will not last for 50 or 75 years, Elvira, as you challenge us, but as we will bring around this kind of change in mobility, I think it will be important influencer for future. And maybe very simple thing as just plant trees. As simple as that. Trees are long lasting, and as we're starting to plant them now, in 75 years, they will be a great asset. And sometimes we don't need to overlook kind of simple things as planting trees.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
also in urban environments, yeah, especially.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
they cool off, they help capture water, things like that.
Yeah, all the public infrastructure around the greenery. And those two things, it's good for climate and good for people's health and mental health and just well-being. So it's many benefits.
We have run out of time, unfortunately, and this is such a shame because I see that we could actually go on for hours here. Great group. Thank you all so very much for contributing to this and having such wonderful insights and thinking along, and also not spending time on COVID, as Peter said, because it's important, but it's not, it's not everything. For those who listened to us today, and also for the panelists of the group, our profiles are up on the TechChill website together with contact details. We can continue this discussion offline in whatever form you all prefer. All the panelists, I hope, are open to further communication and ready to think along. We have touched on the past and on the future and what are the obstacles and what the opportunities are as well. So let's just hope that things start changing very, very quickly, and soon enough we are able to turn the situation around so that humanity can survive. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank
you.
Meet you all
Thank
and
you
have
so
a
much.
great rest of the day.
Thank you.
you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.